I really appreciate that you've been a strong supporter of Israel, and I know that you wrote that letter in disagreement with the British Union of Academics and their boycott of Israeli academics, and I think many academics really appreciate your support.
Well, I've personally been supportive of Israel since I was a young man, and I'm delighted to be president of Seton Hall University, an institution which, going back to 1953, started our Judeo-Christian Institute and really began dialogue between Jews and Christians at a time right after the Second World War. And so we were the first university in the world to do that. So it's not only my personal support, it's the support of Seton Hall University to building up great bridges between Jews and Catholics. My personal goal is to reassure the Seton Hall University community and our friends outside, Catholics and Jews, that the work of Sister Rose is continuing. Rose spent her life at Seton Hall University building extraordinary bridges between the Catholic and Jewish communities. She's built on the work of Monsignor John Osterreicher, work of Father John Flannery, the work of Dr. Bossman, Rabbi Finkel, Father Frizzell. But Rose was unique, and she's just beloved in both the Catholic and Jewish community. And I want to assure everyone that her work is continuing. In 1967, I left Seton Hall as a senior and began 9 years in Europe. And I realize the more you travel, the more you realize how beautiful the world is, how complex the problems are. To put your feet in other people's countries and situations is for me the greatest of all educational experiences. As a president, as you know, I'm beginning some important initiatives so that our students can get out and to see what the world, to see what Israel is like and the diversity in Israel, to go to China, to go to Mexico, to go to other places. I mean, as we come back as Americans, I think we always understand two things. We're glad we're Americans, and we would not trade that for anything. But we realize many other countries do things often better than we do. And each country has their own destiny and their own issues, their own problems. But certainly for us to be able to send students with a great teacher like yourself to Israel to get the big picture, Dr. Wish, to me is a rare and an almost priceless educational experience.
I have done some traveling here in the States through AmeriCorps, which is basically like a domestic Peace Corps. I'm looking forward to expanding it now beyond the United States.
I'm very interested in human rights, and I know a couple of people from Palestine, and I grew up with a couple of people from Israel, so I thought it'd be really interesting once I saw the flyer to actually take advantage of the opportunity.
I'm studying international relations at the Whitehead School, and one of my concentrations is developing economies. So that's another thing that's interesting for me. I mean, how the economies have developed there, how they're working with what was desert and turning it into something that's productive. So that's kind of, ecologically speaking and sustainable development-wise, that's pretty interesting for me as well.
Well, I eventually, in the end, want to work for either the FBI or the CIA, working as an intelligence analyst. And the senior SEM that I did was on terrorism, and I've taken my electives in the Middle East, so that piqued my interest.
It would be my first trip out of the United States. Like, both my parents come from Cuba, so anything that I can do with traveling outside the U.S. and getting a different perspective on things. I know my parents have a different perspective, and it just seemed like a very good, positive experience for me.
Well, I was bitten with the travel bug at a pretty young age. I have a lot of family who works in the airlines, and I've done some traveling around the world. So when the opportunity comes up to go to a new place, I kind of jump at it. On top of that, of course, I mean, just being in the field of international relations Israel is a hot spot for that type of academia.
Especially after I took the Israeli class last semester, I definitely came to see Israel more as divided, whereas before I probably saw how most Americans see it, which is it was a very unitary actor. You can only learn so much in the classroom, so I think it's key that we really get out there and we see for ourselves, you know, the third sector, we see these different organizations in action.
I've been to Israel once before. I went in 1996. Didn't go to the Gaza Strip, but I did see a big part of the West Bank. That trip, I would say, I mostly got a better understanding of the Palestinian culture not so much of the Israeli culture. So my goal with this trip is to get the other view, to get the other perspective, and to understand the Israeli culture more.
I grew up in South Dakota, and not that our public school system is in shambles, but I never was introduced to any sort of literature, any sort of real knowledge about what's going on in the Middle East, and not just Israel and Palestine, but just, you know, what is actually happening over there with the restructuring and, you know, Iran. Like, we didn't learn any of that.
Growing up in the mid-'80s, you heard a lot about Israel back then in the news, so you heard a lot of different stories and you get an impression of it. The impression I get is that America definitely supports Israel more than any other country in the world, and I'm not convinced completely of the rationale yet, but I have an open mind, so that's one reason I'm going there, to see, culturally speaking, even putting politics aside, just how people actually live there.
I feel like just the media in general portrays it as, like, from the American point of view, as, you know, we support Israel through and through, and I want to go to, like, get to know each side and each perspective. I think that would be interesting.
I'm interested in what other countries do so that we can improve our own system, because although we may be like the richest country, the superpower, we're still lacking when it comes to education.
I do like the idea of doing a comparative study of nonprofits in the U.S. versus nonprofits in Israel. I mean, I know that they both have very different goals and tasks. I know I want to work in the nonprofit or NGO sector, public service sector.
The international relations and the nonprofit sector both go hand in hand. I think they complement each other.
I kind of look at myself as an Arab American ambassador. I want to be able to give a better vision of what Israel is to at least my Arab community.
In the country you have so many themes. You have democracy, you have all the different parliamentary procedures going on, you have so many different problems ranging from how do you feed and house people to combating terrorism and so on. And you have cultures clashing, religions clashing. It's like a perfect laboratory for understanding 21st century politics.
I thought it was amazing. That was exactly like how I worded it, because everyone thought that I wasn't going to come back. They thought it was this dangerous state, that I was going to deal with all these terrorists. And I told them it wasn't like that at all. I had no problems. Everyone was extremely nice. I learned a lot, and I saw they like embraced me into their culture and the religious atmosphere. Everything was just amazing.
Me, I guess I remember most of the political debates that we had was with Yitzhak Sorolov, I believe it was his name.
Sokolov, right?
Yeah, very interesting debate that we had. He lived in one of the West Bank settlements, and it was just interesting to hear his side of it. And basically we were talking, it was very interesting because we were having this conversation while we were sitting on a playground that at that time was empty, but in a few more hours would be full of both Arab well, not Palestinian, but Arab Israeli children and Jewish Israeli children. So it's kind of an interesting setting for like this really big debate between everybody in our group and him.
Definitely, I'd encourage anybody to go to Israel, but if they go there, keep an open mind. And I just remember, it's not what you expect. Someone told me this over there. They say, yeah, it may be the Holy Land for you if you're just visiting, but this is a country where people live. And it's a country that has problems just like any other country, and maybe more than any other country. So it's kind of a weird layering of, okay, it's the Holy Land with all these historic sites, but this is a real people with a real society, real problems, and there's different organizations that try to help these problems, and there's external and internal conflict, violence, and it's all these things layered on top of each other. So I'd recommend go, if don't trust what you see in the news, I'd recommend going there and seeing it, and don't have too many preconceived notions about what to expect.
I didn't know that it was so diverse there. Like, I guess I assumed, like, okay, there's the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it's just them. But there's just so many more people involved, there's so much more added to it that you just don't expect, like the Bedouins, there's the Ethiopians there, and there's just so many different types of Arabs there, it's just so diverse.
Everyone thinks that there's this, like, very thick conflict between the Muslims and the Christians and the Jewish individuals, but that's not, I didn't see that at least. I felt like everyone lived pretty close, and although there were different quarters, they all were still living comfortably together. Like, it wasn't you walk past someone and you just like stare them down. It wasn't that hatred that people think happens here.
It's a very new country, it's a new nation state that is dealing with the issues of being a new country, which is forming a constitution. I mean, just the basics that we kind of take for granted here in the United States. Plus dealing with a very concentrated amount of different people with different views, not to mention the struggle over land, which is, I mean, also something here in the U.S. We've got, you know, millions of square miles of land, and Israel is such a small country that I think that's one of their unique issues.
The religious aspects of things, going to the old Jerusalem, walking around the city, and the way people dressed, and very different from the United States.
Traveled a lot of the country, and it was a good experience to see a lot of the NPOs and NGOs and how they operate in a different cultural setting, and then also just to completely experience another culture.
Basically, my life has changed from Israel completely, because before I went to Israel, I had about maybe 7 different jobs I wanted to do. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. But after going to Israel, and I saw just the way how people can embrace the military, and they don't complain. Like, they go, they serve their country, whether it's community service or through the military. It's a very strong, like, I guess, respect, and I really appreciate that and envy that they have this like strong Israeli love there. And I wanted to bring that back to the United States and make it like this American, like, I am American, I am proud to be American, I want to show others that I'm American. So currently I'm filling out my application for the Peace Corps.
I guess coming from the United States, which has a very different healthcare system, I expected a very different facility than what was there. To be honest with you, as silly as it sounds, I thought it wouldn't be as nice as an American facility. But here you have a hospital in the middle of the Negev Desert in Beersheba that is equipped with state-of-the-art equipment, has good doctors, provides excellent care, and as we saw, they deal with everything from, you know, the rocket attacks in Gaza Strip, which is 20 miles away, to everyday injuries and traumas, and they do it just as good, if not better, and that's socialized medicine.
One thing, when we were at the I guess it was Ben Gurion University, and we were talking to some of the students there, and one thing that really struck me as something that could be transplanted here was the open apartment plan or program, where they take the students. In order to get more integrated into the neighborhood and to have a positive influence in the neighborhood, they would take students, rent them an apartment in a pretty, I guess, a low income and I don't know, a crime-ridden, but a neighborhood with lots of social problems, transplant them right into that neighborhood, rent them an apartment, and have that apartment door always open for the people in the neighborhood, whether it's the kids, whether it's for adults, and just, it was for everything. It was like to help kids do their homework. It was to provide kids in the neighborhood a place to do homework, or to play, or just to talk. They even mentioned going on walks with the different ladies in the neighborhood to help them do their errands. So it was just a good way to kind of bridge a gap between academic okay, people here in academia which might not be in that neighborhood necessarily otherwise, and with the people in that neighborhood, and kind of provide benefits for both of them and provide some kind of understanding. So that impressed me a lot.
Me too.
The Negev weaving project was the most, I think, because the women of the town, like you would think like the young people, like the university that we went to, you'd expect the young people, because they're young, to come up with something and do something about life there and change. But to see older women going to try and do something with themselves and make a change, it was shocking, but I loved it.
I went and visited the Bedouin community and met the Israeli man who was helping this Bedouin Arab woman start up her business and start being independent and going to school and everything she's doing in her life. Just the experience of being there in her house, talking with her very frankly about all the issues she's facing. That was a surprise to me. I wasn't expecting to be in the middle of the desert, in the middle of a Bedouin encampment, somewhere where our tour bus wouldn't even go to.
Right. When we visited the elderly organization, and I learned that this is probably the most unique organization compared to the rest of the world, because they're making their own crafts and they're selling the crafts in the gift stores.
Yad Lakashish, where the project for the elderly. Well, in my experience, I haven't seen anything similar to elderly in a project where older people have something to do all the time. I haven't seen anything like that here.
I would say, of course, you should go. Of course, you should try to go. And why? It's just a whole nother perspective on the nonprofit world.
Yeah, I would go back.
100%. Definitely, you have to go no matter what. Don't let anything hold you back.